Good evening and welcome to a new edition of To The Point. This evening we'll be discussing Egypt's Sustainable Development Report. A report was issued recently that not only encompasses Egypt but the whole Arab region. Egypt's report was the first one to be issued, and this evening we'll be delving into how does this report reflect on our progress in meeting our 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. With us this evening to shed light on this issue is Mr. Khaled, co-founder and managing director of the Synergy Center for International and Strategic Studies. Dr. Khaled, a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
The first report issued was the Egyptian report.
Yes. That is
the significance of that. How come Egypt, because this was done in an event under the auspices of the Arab League.
Yes.
And why is it that the Egyptian report was the first one issued?
So the first one, this is part of a bigger project of the League of Arab States. So the League of Arab States was endeavoring on finding a mechanism to finance sustainable development and to achieve and enable the achievement of the sustainable development goals in the Arab countries. Naturally, in order to be able to identify this better, we needed to have some sort of national understanding of the costing of SDGs and what are the financing gaps that were needed for it. So in order to do that, we decided, or it was decided in cooperation with Dr. Mahmoud Wahideen under his supervision and with his guidance, of course, to start on the first of its type nationalized financing for development or financing sustainable development report. Now, the significance of this is that this is the first report of its kind within the world. This has never been done before. So the UN issues normally financing for development report on a global scale, which identifies the gaps between the inflows and the outflows and the enablers of the of financing sustainable development, financing the sustainable development agenda. But on a national level, this has never been done before. So this was a learning experience for us, which we also aspire to share with the whole world. That's why there's this large dynamics around the report. There's this large significance of it on a global scale as well.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the report and sustainable development, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is in Brussels to attend the sixth round of the EU-Africa Summit, and maybe one of the key issues that the President will be talking about is the integration of Africa's integration into the global economy and support that is needed for to achieve 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. With us on the line to discuss the issue of the President's visit is His Excellency Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Your Excellency, can you hear us?
Yes, how are you?
Good evening, sir. President Sisi is in Brussels to attend the EU-Africa Summit. One of the key issues that will be discussed is support that is needed to achieve the 2030 SDGs. Your comment?
As a matter of fact, and by chance, I was lecturing this morning at Nasser Academy, Faculty of War, with almost more than 30 generals coming from 20 African countries.
Yes.
And I was discussing this specific matter, that we have a sort of unbalanced situation for the relation of Africa with the developed countries. The flow of money going out of Africa to pay back its debts and to finance its imports from Europe or America is much more than the money coming to Africa, because Africa still cannot attract enough for foreign direct investment and still cannot export enough to cover the burdens of the debt burden. And we have to change this. We cannot continue paying much more than we receive. Even in Egypt, and as you well know, that Europe and the European Union is our main trade partner, and they thank God, and of course they are our main trade partners. They give us some financial assistance,
Yes.
and they make a sort of calculations that for each euro we are getting as economic assistance from Europe, we import by $106. So as a matter of fact, and still this is the case, that the money flow going from Egypt to Europe is much more than the money coming from Europe. But at the same time, I must confess that since we signed the association agreement with Europe, our exports to Europe increased 4 times. Mm-hmm. But still we have a lot of homework to be done. Egypt in a relative good position if you compare it with countries like South Africa. And in Africa really, they need a huge sum of investment in order to enter in a new era where they produce food industry, or they produce oil or chemical industries and so on. And my experience in Africa, once I imported some containers of canned food made in Egypt, and I gave some presents to some high officials. Then one day the Prime Minister of Cameroon called me and he said, I am not calling you to thank you about the gift you are sending me. I am congratulating you that Egypt produces such thing, and we do not yet reach this level of industry. Mm. And the trick there, that we have to make a common effort between African countries, and I always said that a small or relatively middle-sized investment can make miracles in Africa. Mm-hmm. Let us go in those countries, establish small factories to produce canned food, to produce timber and wood. I tried once to import wood from Cameroon, which is one of the most big forestry in Africa. I couldn't, because if the colony in Africa has finished, but still the economic colonialism is still there. You cannot buy Cameroonian wood from Cameroon. You have to buy it from Rome, Paris, or anywhere in Europe with a price you cannot afford. So let us go with a small or medium-sized project where we can cut the wood, where we can export it directly to Egypt, and we gain a lot, both of us. But this, of course, needs a lot of homework to be done. Yes. Still, bureaucracy in Africa is killing any project. Still, the banking system needs a lot to be done, and I hear mention the decision of our president to open Bank Misr, a branch of Bank Misr in Djibouti. We should do that. Transport from and going to Africa is very expensive, and it takes a lot of time. From Cameroon, where the distance between Cairo and Yaoundé would take you a couple of hours, it takes me 3 days to come to Egypt from Yaoundé. I have to spend a couple of nights in Kenya, Nairobi, or in Lagos. Mm-hmm. And still we don't have a full coverage of our airplane in every place in Africa. So we have, it is a very important task. It is fruitful, but it needs a lot of effort in order to come to a situation where we can participate with our brothers in Africa in many fields, and I think we are up to that. But we have to do our homework.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, thank you very much for joining us on To The Point. Mr. Khaled, the Egyptian report was issued first. worth noting, the president is in Brussels, and this is one of the issues that he will be addressing, not just for Egypt, but for the continent at large. How do you see us marching towards achieving our sustainable development reports? I know you were a co-author of the Egyptian report, and what is being reflected in that report?
So now, in order to see this, we need to zoom out from the picture that we're seeing right now.
Yes.
It is important to note that when the countries of the planet had adopted the Sustainable Development Agenda, or the 2015 SDG agenda, the aim of it was to provide peace and prosperity, primarily, leaving no one behind, for the whole planet.
Yes.
So it is not a national endeavor, but it is more of a cross-border issue to be tackled. Exactly. Now, as His Excellency was discussing, there is an issue in financing the Sustainable Development Agenda. That's what makes it different from the Millennium Development Goals. From 2015, Egypt has endeavored to adopt the SDG agenda very, very firmly, as much as we can. Now, being in a group of countries which we call the lower middle income countries, we have issued the SDS first in 2015. It is being revamped right now as well. So the Sustainable Development Strategy from the Ministry of Planning is being developed to adopt the new changes that are reflected post-COVID as well, as the new developments after the economic reform program, which is basically what is highlighted in this report. Now, when we talk about financing, we don't just mean the funding, but we also mean the strategy behind it, the thought process behind it. How do we increase our revenues, not just by increasing the actual revenues, but by streamlining the process of financing, by streamlining our expenditure, by creating these linkages between the SDGs and providing a maximized return on investment, if you will, from a business standpoint. So Egypt has been committed to the project as well, and to achieving the 2030 goals. It is also very noteworthy that our counterpart in this project was the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development. They were jointly tasked with providing us with all the data that we required, and they were very transparent in it, because what this report actually does is it creates the landscape for a new debate, for an honest debate and a transparent debate around the issues and the gaps that are facing us in financing the Sustainable Development Goals as well. Which is why one of the key things about this report, and why it took so long to develop, it took around a year and a half of actual work to develop the report, not because the writing process of the report itself took very long, but because the partnership process in engaging counterparts was, which was a brilliant strategy by Dr. Mahmoud Mohiddin. We find that we have 19 authors involved, we have 5 researchers, we have 14 different international organizations that have provided their feedback on it, and 7 government counterparts as well, including the Central Bank of Egypt, who have provided their insights. So overall, we see that there is a commitment to achieve the SDG goals. We do have challenges, which we are honest in addressing as well. And that is what the report tackles in this. So how do we address our challenges? How do we bridge those gaps? And how do we move forward to providing what the government actually aims to provide? And with what tools do we have in place as well?
What is, if you can sort of highlight the critical challenges or the main challenges that were reflected in the report?
Well, in each chapter there are several challenges highlighted. So, of course, one of the key points is achieving social equality. So, which is why the report lays a lot of focus also on the presidential initiative Haya Karima, because this is a really serious initiative that has been launched. It has a budget of around $45 billion US, which is tremendous. That's around 4.2% of our GDP spending within the next 3 years. So localizing the SDGs and enabling equal opportunities and achieving growth, eradicating poverty and hunger, these are a lot of the core beliefs that were reflected in the report. But we also look at the inflows of revenues towards the government, as well as the expenditure and
Yes.
debt, which is one of the most serious debates that are being had right now, the issue of debt, and how can we turn it into, how can we sustainably manage our debt process as well. How do we utilize financing not just as an enabler, but how do we also capitalize on trade as a dynamic driver for the growth and achieving the SDGs, as well as utilizing science, technology, innovation, and digitization to be able to use it as an enabler to enhance it. So we do find a lot of challenges, of course.
The issue of debt, because this is one of the issues that was addressed a number of times. Quite a large chunk of the debt is going into developmental issues. I mean, you're not borrowing or taking debts to feed people. You're taking the debt to initiate projects, to develop projects that create job opportunities, that end up alleviating and elevating the social standing of people. Why is it that this report looked at debt as a challenge? From which perspective? Because this is one of the issues that people are concerned about.
A lot of people are concerned about debt. I'm honestly, I'm not an expert to speak about debt. I have to say that. I have to give credit where it's due. Dr. Sarah Al-Khishin was the brilliant author of the debt chapter, of the managing sustainable debt chapter. But this is one of the major issues, because we do have, when we look at debt overall from a generic perspective, we do have a legacy that we carry as well. So it's not just the current debt that we're undertaking right now or uptaking.
So what was inherited
but
as
what
well?
was also inherited as well, both on the local level and on the foreign debt level as well. So these are all issues that make it a lot more complicated to look at. Now there are several modeling exercises that have been performed, but overall, when we start to think about that, we do need to boost our economy. We are taking very large and very serious steps in developing mega projects right now. That's been ongoing for a couple of years. We need to turn into what is called a knowledge-based economy, a diversified economy. We need to boost our exports. These are all things that would help us manage our issues more concretely. So yes, we do take on a little bit more debt when we look at the scheme of things, but we are also boosting the economy. We have undergone one of the most successful economic reform programs as well. That is not to say that we do not have challenges, but the thing is, are these challenges being addressed? That is what the report looks at, and we find that in a lot of areas, a lot of the challenges are actually being addressed, and the government is actually aware of it. So, so that is something that provides a lot of comfort in this as well. We do have some policy recommendations where things could be fine-tuned and could be improved as well, which is what is outlined as well in the very beginning of the report and in each chapter. So, so that is.
One of the other critical issues is education.
Yes.
How did this report address this issue? Because the reason I'm raising this, because you're talking about a country whose population, not just the country, but
yes,
the continent really, or this region, the Arab region, most of our population happen to be from the younger age, the future. They need to be educated well, they need to be trained well, and they need to be equipped with skills that are compatible and competitive globally.
Definitely, definitely. So education was touched upon in several of the chapters. I will talk about my own, about the chapter that I co-authored, which is Science, Technology, Innovation, and Digitization, because one of the inflows or byproducts for being able to be an innovative country and being able to have advanced technologies is having a very robust education system. We find that we have a national issue with education, especially in the early education. So between grades 1 to 9 specifically, this is where we should focus a lot more.
Yes.
We do have, when we talk about numbers, and we go to higher education, for example, we'll find that we are on par with the global numbers. So we do have the same global averages when it comes to number of enrolled students, but the quality of the education has to be further improved. Now, this is a new perspective that is being discussed right now and that is being taken also very seriously by the government, especially when they start talking about things like multidimensional poverty. So we do find that education, and as you said, having the foresight to be able to correctly assess the skills needed for the future is a very important thing, and equipping our young generation with it from very early ages on. So adopting these technologies early on and adopting these skills early on is also very critical, which is one of our policy recommendations in the Science, Technology and Innovation and Digitization chapter, is to actually equip the younger generation, starting from grades 1 to 9, with skills required for technology, required for research methodologies, required for scientific research as well, so that they are able to tackle the future challenges, they are able to self-develop. Because when you look at innovation itself, now we could spend a lot of effort to try and boost innovation, but it only works when the growth of innovation comes organically from within the society as well. So there's a slight bit of culture change that we need here. There's a slight bit of fine-tuning that we need there. But however, education still does need long-standing efforts. Primarily also, I would contribute it to the legacy that was inherited and having a relatively fragile system, if you will, with several changes. So that's where we discuss education as well.
Know-how, because technology not only is expensive, but the know-how.
Yeah.
The challenges in the know-how.
Yes.
How was this addressed, or are there recommendations for how to exchange technology, especially within the continent or within the region?
There are several initiatives from the UN actually for technology innovation or know-how exchange, because as we said earlier, you know, the SDGs, achieving them is about partnerships. It's based on partnerships and on being able to export and import this type of know-how to be able to achieve this. However, we also find that a lot of the best innovative experiences come from within the society itself, because understanding the local demands is necessary. So what works in Europe doesn't necessarily work in Egypt. The challenges are different and the solutions are different as well. So having these solutions organically come from the society and enabling the youth to generate these ideas and empowering them to also achieve these ideas is also something very important. We talk about frugal innovation in the chapter, which is also not just providing technology and providing technological solutions, but also providing them at cheap cost and being able to scale them up to the less privileged population as well. So that is also a very important driver. So know-how is best driven from within the society itself, from within the local society itself, because a lot of times you would find that people actually know the solutions to their problems.
Yes.
Sometimes a little bit of guidance is needed, sometimes a bit of technology is required as well. But we also develop a lot of our own solutions. So that is also very important to foster this and to be able to build on it.
Did the report tackle how to achieve those goals, taking into account that, for example, we have been suffering from a pandemic the past 3 years, and unfortunately this is a global phenomenon which we cannot detach ourselves from. How is this issue addressed in the report?
Now, we do take into account in a lot of the chapters the effect of that COVID had, of course, because COVID has been a disruptor, if you will, for the pandemic, for the global economy, specifically for the emerging economies or for lower middle income countries, because their budgets were already extended and quite thin actually, but so they don't have this financial cushion to be able to increase their spending to cover the costs. However, we do find that in some areas, COVID actually presented an opportunity, and it drove and accelerated a lot of innovation. So we addressed this specifically in the Science, Technology, Innovation chapter as well.
So that's digitization.
Exactly.
It pushed for people to accept.
Absolutely. So
Digitization
when we found that, one of the contradictions was that we found that a lot of the capital was drying up because there was a lot of uncertainty. So venture capitals weren't really investing a lot, but that soon changed because people started realizing that fostering STI or science, technology, innovation, and also achieving digitization provides them not only with resilience, but it also allows for more efficient functionality of the government. It also allows for more governance. It provides cheaper government services as well. So it allows you to give a better quality of services, but with cheaper mechanisms. And so we've seen a lot of rise in telemedicine, for example. We've seen a lot of rise in online education. We've seen a lot of people who have rapidly adapted and rapidly adopted technologies as well, which we sometimes thought were not possible. So we never thought of remote work, as something that could be easily adopted by everybody. But we also found the government even adopting this. So these are all challenges that we were faced with, but it also was an accelerator at that point in time as well.
The report, was it, in your opinion, a platform that sort of identifies not only the challenges, but aligns policies? Because some say that to achieve sustainable development within the Arab continent, for example, or the Arab region, we need to have a unified approach that is compatible. It's not just financial issues. Was this report capable of guiding the coming phase to achieve our SDGs, the alignment that is needed, the approach that is needed?
So the report takes into consideration, of course, the Sustainable Development Strategy, and part of this Sustainable Development Strategy is also aligning Egypt with, for example, with the Africa 2063 agenda as well. So we do take into account the national agendas, we do take into account the regional agendas, we do take into account that more collaboration is required. So not just in terms of alignment, but we need more collaboration and enhanced collaboration. In the bigger picture of the League of Arab States, of course, they have launched several other reports that tackle achieving sustainable development within conflict countries, for example, which also stresses on the fact that more collaboration is needed. This is not just on an Arab States scale, but this is also required on a global scale, which is primarily what also President Sisi has been addressing over the past year at least. Specifically, this was addressed in COP26,
yes,
and also in Brussels, as we see today as well.
Can our developmental goals resolve our political differences, in your opinion? Or will they be a hurdle and maybe slow down the process of our development goals?
I do believe that they slow down the development of the goals, of course, because when you work towards a common goal, then you tend to work faster. Everybody works faster with a little bit of help from here and there. But I also do believe that slowly we are starting to realize that, sustainable development isn't a luxury. It is not to be seen as something for the niche or something for the developing nations. We're starting to face actually climate change effects. We've seen that in crops, we've seen that in desertification, we've seen that in a lot of different aspects. And we've seen that in all countries. So countries are starting to capitalize on that and to realize that. It is also becoming a necessity for businesses as well to tackle sustainable development, because we see that a lot of organizations, a lot of nations are requiring people to adhere to certain standards in order to be able to export and import from them. So you know, I don't believe it's a luxury anymore, and that's where the shift has turned once we started shifting to sustainable development rather than climate change as we tackled it before.
COP27, which will be held later this year, November specifically of this year. How is this being reflected in the report? Because we have climate action, we have clean and affordable energy. Under more than one of the goals,
Yes.
the issue of environment really is embedded in quite a lot of those goals.
Yes. We take a look at how serious is Egypt about, you know, climate change and sustainable development. We find that all the facts point out towards the seriousness of the nation towards achieving the goals. We're working with limited tools and limited resources, but we're doing the best that we can to be able to achieve the sustainable development goals. We're also asking international community for knowledge, and we're collaborating as much as possible. So we see a lot of partnerships being formed and forged here. We see that, you know, a lot has to do with climate and a lot has to do with the environment, but you can't really ask people to be cautious about the environment if they are struggling to achieve their day-to-day needs, you know. So first you need to provide socioeconomic benefits to the people, enable them to be able to work better, enable them to be able to eradicate poverty, and then you will find that people are automatically adhering towards a better environment and a more sustainable environment. So, but I do believe that, you know, just by hosting COP27, by issuing 3 versions of the voluntary national reviews, so we're one of 10 countries in the world that has issued 3 versions of its voluntary national reviews. This all shows a commitment to SDGs, you know, and it all shows a commitment to the agenda, and it shows a real serious commitment from the government to be able to achieve these goals and to be able to provide better prosperity for the people.
Speaking of prosperity, some institutions use reports, country reports, and certain economic evaluator factors to think whether they should be investing or not. We're talking about sustainable development and how advanced and how on course you are towards achieving your developmental goals is really one of the factors that some might either attract or drive away FDI. Yes. How does this report, in your opinion, attract FDI for Egypt?
I can't really speak as to whether it will attract FDIs or not, but what it shows is it shows a serious government commitment to transparency. It shows a serious commitment to providing data and addressing the challenges. So the first step to solving any problem is recognizing that we do have a problem.
Yes.
We do have challenges. We're not afraid to say that. We say very clearly in a lot of different reports that we do have challenges. And we also name the attempts that we've done to be able to address these challenges. Now, I do believe that a lot of investors, when you know, you can provide them with reports that tell them that the economy is doing brilliantly and everything, but investors are also quite intelligent, you know. So they look at the government and they see, well, you know, are they serious about what they're saying? Can I trust what they're saying or not? And I think that this report is very important in that sense, that it shows that we are really serious to do that. We're very serious to provide all the data needed. We're very serious to engage the international community to provide feedback in the report as well, and to be able to accept their criticisms about the report, and to engage the government counterparts to be able to see what they're seeing on a local and national level as well, and to come up with the best type of analysis. So we got the best experts. We got a really brilliant team of dynamic people that are working within a common goal. We got one of the best mentors supervising the project. So Dr. Mahmoud Mohideen is of course, I mean, he's a legend when it comes to financing. And we have all the government support behind it. So what this shows is how serious the government of Egypt is about achieving sustainable development. And that, for me, is the key takeaway from the report.
How is the young generation emphasized in that report? Because this is one of your key assets, youth.
Yes.
Where some parts of the continent really are suffering due to the lack of youth, you really have...
We do take this into account, or well, as I said, different chapters have different things to talk about. So one of the, or the main methodology that Dr. Mahmoud has adopted in this report was that each co-author is free to identify the subject, because that's the whole point of getting experts on the topic to talk about it. So so we do talk about, in the STI chapter, we do talk about human development. We do talk about the need for enabling SMEs and enabling innovators and young incubators, and allowing incubators as well to foster this. But we also talk about the education level and, you know, the inputs and outputs of the whole innovation process. There are, in the business sector, it is also mentioned as well. It has a lot more in-depth talk about engaging SMEs in the developmental process. I believe that also one of the serious commitments about youth has been emphasized in the Human Development Report that was issued a couple of months back, which talks more about the human development aspect. But what this report focuses on is the financing aspect of the sustainable development. So we do take into account socioeconomic factors, but we're mostly concerned with how does it relate to the aspect of financing. And Dr. Mahmoud also made a point to always bring us back to the point of financing.
Have we resolved in this report, in your opinion, have we identified potential financing channels? I
do believe that this report has identified a lot of challenges. Dr. Mahmoud has laid it out also in his presentation when he was launching the report. We have identified a lot of challenges. However,
no, channels of finance.
This is talked about a lot in the Integrated National Financial Framework, which is also something that the government is working on right now. We have identified channels, but I believe that what is most important is that this is a start of a serious debate about it. And the value of this report is being able to update it every year to be able to identify the new challenges, address them timely, because financing isn't just a strategy. It's a constant process of monitoring, evaluation, of being able to have evidence-based policy making, to be able to make the right decisions given the accurate data that we have as well. So I think that this report just paves the way for a different type of debate between experts. Between policymakers and international organizations. And I think that's what's really highlighted in this.
In your opinion, what is the most impressive part of that report?
I think the methodology behind developing it was by far the most engaging that I have ever seen.
Meaning?
Having so many different revisions of this report before it was published, having so many different experts work on this report. So if we just highlight the process very briefly, we gave Dr. Mahmoud gave the authors the flexibility to draft their chapters at the beginning. Then we had a roundtable discussion with the Ministry of Planning and with several international experts. And then we took a lot of comments. They were reflected, and we had an update of the chapters. And then this was sent to the UN headquarters in New York and in Geneva, shared with every single UN agency as well. 13 UN agencies as well as the OECD had provided a lot of elaborate comments on the report. These were also reflected, and then it was shared with the government counterparts to be able to give them also a chance to elaborate their comments on it. So the whole engagement process was really intended not just to issue a report, but to start a new framework for new debate, talking about sustainability and talking about how to finance this and how to actually bridge the gaps. And I think this was the most impressive part of this.
Mr. Khaled Sayed, unfortunately our time is up. I'd like to thank you very much for your fruitful input and wish you the very best of luck in your endeavors. And we'll definitely be looking forward to the next report, and maybe now we have a platform to compare where we were and where we will be heading.
Thank you very much.
Again, I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening on To The Point. I'd like to thank you, the viewers. We'll see you same time next week. Until then, good night.